So guys, this is the second session for Spark Structured Streaming, right? In the first session, we discussed about what structured streaming is, how it relates to data frames or Spark SQL, right? And we talked about the output modes, that there are three output modes. The first is append mode, in which only newly processed rows will be added to the results in the last trigger. Then there's update mode. It will be only showing the rows which are changed and only show them into the console. The complete mode will show everything, right? Today we will be discussing about what type of sinks can be there. Like sinks means where we can write the output, right? So when we talk about sink, what we did here in last few examples, we are writing everything to console, right? So console can be one of the sink, right? So how Spark streaming application works? That you are reading data from somewhere. This data, into our case, we are reading it from console, right? Console, and we are writing nc-lk and then some port, let's say 6445, and then we are writing something here. So this application nc-lk, and which is running on this console, is acting as the source for us, right? And then we are reading this using read stream API of Spark Structured Streaming, and then we have connected our structured streaming API to this source, right? We tell something like this, that okay, whatever, df is equal to spark dot read stream, source is equal to this console, port is equal to this, and then we are writing back to the console. We are writing back to the console, right? So let's see here quickly that what we did. So when we go to our code, this is what we are doing, right? So what we were doing, that we are reading from console from some host and some port, and then once it has been, we do some processing, but we are writing back to console. So it means, so just to tell you again, this was the source. We are reading from this host, this port, from the socket, right? And we are writing using write stream to in append mode, output mode to the console, right? So what we can say here, that our source is console. Source, let's say this is source, and this is, let's say, sink. So what we did till now, we read it from socket, and then we wrote to console, right? What we will be covering today, that we can read from file and we can write to console. Third, we can read from file and we can write to file as well. Fourth, we can read from Kafka, which I didn't cover yet. We can write to file or console, right? So let's see how things work when we read something from file and write something to console. It's very simple. Let's see. So I have created file structured, whatever this file name is. What I'm doing here, that I have created my Spark session, right? I have passed so many configs to it, that is Spark SQL, partition is equal to 3, shutdown, graceful is equal to true. And let's say if you want to infer the schema, then we need to parse this. I'll cover this in a lot of detail, but these three properties I have passed into config, okay? Now, what I'm doing now, I'm reading the stream. Let me copy it, and I'll tell you in detail. So let's delete it, and let's paste Control A, delete, and let's paste it here, right? So whenever we were reading file, you in Spark Structured API, what we were doing? We were doing something like this, as far as I remember, right? So we're doing spark.read.format, exactly same. I think exactly same. Now, since we are reading a stream, we are using read stream, right? And this is the path. It means this is a test folder into my home directory where I'm running the code, and there should be some files inside it. Okay, so let's see here. So this is my test folder. Let's say if I have 5 files. In fact, let me do one thing. Let's go to this properties and open this folder. Okay, and let's go here and let's do one thing. Just copy one file, Control C, and delete everything, and then paste this file. Okay, try again. Okay, let it be. So 1 second, guys. Cancel. Just 1 more second. Target. Okay. So let's do one thing. I have deleted all the files without copying it. I'll go here, C data and zip.json, right? This is my file, perfect. So what I'll do, I'll just copy this file and I'll paste it here into the test directory. Okay, so I'll paste it here. So cancel. Something is going wrong. Let me refresh it quickly. So refresh. This is gone. Now I'll say Control V. So it is pasted, right? So what I'm doing now, I'm reading the test folder, which is in JSON format. I'm creating a view over the folder, right? And then I am counting the number of rows which has zip code type is equal to standard. So let me show you how my files look like. Let me open it here. So I have these many rows, right? And inside these rows, I have something called zip code type. And I have 4 or 5 columns: zip code type, city, and state. And what I need to do using this Spark Structured Streaming API, I need to count how many files, how many rows are with zip code type is equal to standard. Okay, so what I did, I just copied the file. I read the file using read stream API, read stream transformation function, right? And then I registered the temp view, name of the temp view is test, and then I run the function count star onto the test. And simple, this is plain SQL, that zip code type is equal to standard, right? And then what I do here, let me copy it and I'll explain it to you here. So what I'm doing here, that now on zip standard, which is your output data frame, final data frame, I'm saying write stream. And let's say if we want to write in Parquet format, any format, right? We say Parquet format, we say output mode is equal to complete. Then we give the checkpoint directory, and then we give the path where we need to store this. And let's remove or comment this. I'll explain in 2 minutes. And let's try to run this. And meanwhile, since I have put the checkpoint 1 directory here, since I have done it previously, let me delete it. Okay. And let's see if it is working. So I read the file, I did some transformation, and then I'm writing the file again. Okay, so let me run it now. Run as Spark application. And let me go to this directory. C user, this one, output. So we will go here, C user, this one, and then test data, and then output. Okay, and let's refresh this. Okay, so let's see if it's failed. Okay, it failed. What says Parquet doesn't support the complete mode. So I'll explain it to you, but let's say we put update here. Control S, and let's run this. And let's see if something is going on here. So let me delete this. Okay, something is wrong. 1 second. Data source Parquet does not support. Let's see append. So I tried append actually. 1 second. Okay, it won't work. 1 second. I'll tell you in 2 minutes. Okay. So now let me do star here, and let me delete this, and let me run it now. So basically, append won't work with your aggregation function. So I removed the aggregation function from there, and complete and update won't work with the file aggregation or the file. So when we go for any format, and output mode is complete or update, it won't be working. Okay, let's see now. Yeah, it started working. So it created one temporary directory for us, right? And it's running, and let's refresh it. So it created one file for us, right? Parquet file. So what we did, we read the file, then we write the file, then we created the temp view, and in the temp view we are reading only zip code standard, and then we write the file. Okay, so, and this is Spark streaming application, so it will keep running, right, till the time I won't terminate it. It is waiting for my termination, so let me terminate it. Okay, so now this is first thing, but obviously since we won't be able to read the Parquet file, let's do one thing. I'll say format is equal to console. Okay, and I want the checkpoint directory to be this, and I'll comment this path as well for a time being. Now Control S, I'll refresh this, remove the checkpoint directory again, because I have console and all. This is my checkpoint 1 directory. I'll delete it, and let's run it. Okay, so let's see how it's working. So I have just changed the format is equal to console. Okay, so I want it to write to my console all the rows from this test, which is created from zip file, to be written on the console in the append mode. Okay, let's see. Okay, so this is working, right? So what it did, it only gave me all the rows which is standard. Now let me show you one thing. Since this is Spark streaming, right? So if I just copy this file, Control C, and again paste this file, okay, so it just changed the name for me. So what I'm trying to show you here, as soon as I put a new file into the source directory, it will again trigger the job for me. Let's see. So let's do one thing. Let's expand it. So yeah, so what did it? It again triggered a job for me, right? So it again triggered the job for me for the new file. Now let's do one thing. Let's stop this, and let's try one thing. So I'll say now count star. Okay, so what we proved, we read the file from file source, we saved it into Parquet. Now we shown the data into console. Now let's try some aggregation. Let's read the file, try some aggregation, show it on console. Okay, and since it is aggregation, it won't work in append mode. That's for sure, right? Because how Spark will decide how many rows are there? If we append means only new rows, and we are asking Spark to count everything, so there will be a conflict. So we need to put either complete here or update. So let's put complete here. Let's refresh this directory again. Refresh it, and delete this checkpoint directory because I've changed this mode and all. And let's save this and let's run it. So what I did, it should give me the count now, right? So right now I have two files. In each file, if I see, I have how many rows? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rows are there. 2 rows are with unique and 8 rows are with standard. In fact, let's do one thing. Let's remove this file. So result of the first run should be 8. Let's see. So let's clear this console and let's run this. Okay. So basically, I'm just reading the file. I'm counting the number of rows with which has zip code type is equal to standard, and then I'm putting the result onto the console in complete mode. Why complete? Because I'm doing some aggregation here, right? Because aggregation won't work in append mode. Append means only new rows, and Spark will get confused that okay, how can I count the new rows? So it gives us 8. That's fine, right? Let's do one thing. I'll just copy this file again into this test folder. Now the new batch will trigger, and the number of should be 16 now. Let's see. Perfect, right? If I keep copying it, a new batch will be getting triggered, and it will be giving me the number of counts. Perfect. It means what it means. Let's say if I copy 2 files now, right? I copy 2 files and I paste it now here. So what it will do, according to you guys? So it did from 24, it did to 32, and it get to 40. So it means every new file, which whether I'm pasting 5 files at a time, it will trigger 1 batch per file. Let me show you now. So I'll copy these 4 files, right? And I'll paste it again. So 1 file copied, 2 files, 3 files, 4 files. Files are copied. So it created a new batch here, 32, 40, 48. One second. Okay. Now this is interesting. Till now, it went from 32 to 40 and 48, and then it suddenly from 48 it moved to 72. It means it processed 3 or 4 files in a row or in a go, right? So it means if we don't tell Spark how many files it needs to process, so what the default behavior will be, it will process each file which are new, right, in a go, in a batch. So what it did for us, in fact, to prove this, let's do one thing. So from 48, it goes to 72, right? So if I open the calculator quickly, so if I say 72 minus 48 divided by 8, so it means it processed 3 files into one go, because I have 8 rows into one file which has zip code type equal standard. So it means it processed 8 rows or 3 files in a go. How to control this behavior? That I only want Spark to process 1 file in one trigger. Okay, so what Spark says, let me read it for you. We'll go to configs, right? And we'll go here. So what it says, that there can be multiple type of file sources, right? There can be multiple type of sources. So one is called file sources, which we are looking into. If we want to say how many files it can read per trigger, right? Max files per trigger, we can tell Spark using some property. Let's see if we can tell it in some way. So one second. Let's see here into Spark documentation quickly. So we'll say here, Control F. Okay, so what we'll be doing here, that we will be telling it here dot option. Let's try, and we'll say this max file per trigger, and let's say we want to say it 1. Okay, and let's save this and let's run this. And what we'll be doing, we will be removing everything except one file. Checkpoint 1 directory as well, so we'll refresh it. This one, let's delete it. Perfect. And let's try to run this. In fact, clear the console as well. So what I did now, I just put one more property that, okay, please process only one file in one trigger, even though you see multiple files. So if you see multiple files, trigger multiple jobs. Okay, let's see. So it should give us 8 for the first time, since we have one file here into the test, right? And let's copy this file, Control C. And it's running, let's see. Perfect. It gave us 8, right? And then it is waiting for new file. So let's do one thing. Rather than I type it here like this, I'll go to this properties, I'll go to this path. And let's do one thing. Here, create one more, just for a time being, Control C, Control V. So what I did, I just created the copy here, just to do one thing. Control C, Control V, Control V, Control V. So what I'm doing, I'm just creating files into some other folder, right? So I have created multiple files, okay? As you can see. What I'll do now, I'll copy everything, these copy files, and I will paste them into my test. Okay, and let's see how it's working. So I have copied them here. So now I'll say cancel, and let's see. So what it is doing for us, even though I have pasted multiple files in a go, it is only triggering one job at a time and reading each file. Okay, so see now, so I have copied multiple files, right? So rather than it read all the files in one go, it is reading one file at a time and then counting it. In each file, we have 8 records. So all the batches are coming in multiple of 64. So if I go here, if I say Control 8, so I have 8 files, right? Each file has zip code type is equal to standard 8 records, which is validating that condition. So that's why I have 64 here. Now, I'm not sure whether it is confusing, but let's comment this option. Okay, and let's save this. Let's refresh this once more, but this is important and I don't want you to confuse here. So let's delete this. So what I did, I again commented max file trigger 1. I'll just cut these files, Control X, and I will run it again. So what it will do, it will first give me 8, because these files are, I have Control X here and I have pasted somewhere into the temp folder there. Control V, and I'll say Control X again or Control C again, and I'll go here into my test, and let's see first here what it is doing. Okay, so it's still running. Into test, I have only one file. Okay, so it should give me 8. And now, since I have not mentioned this max file trigger is equal to 1, let's see how the behavior is. Okay, perfect. It gave me 8 and stopped because it is waiting for new file, right? And we have disabled this property. So if I pasted these 7 files here, now see the behavior. It should directly give me 64 or 48, since it is reading. So it gave from 8, it gave 48. From 48, it gave me 64. And why it gave me 48 in between? Maybe the files are still copying in the operating system. Ideally, it's from 8, it should give me 64, right? But it gave me 48 in between because files may be still copying. So this is the behavior. If we want to trigger one job for each file, regardless of how many files we copied it, then we need to mention max file per trigger into your read string. Okay, so this is what is written here, that maximum number of files to be considered in every trigger and default to no max. Then there are other properties as well. For example, let's say we want to select only the latest file, then we can say latest file is equal to true. Let's see this thing. I haven't tried it, but let me try. So what I'll say, latest file is equal to true. Control chat, and let's try. So I say true here. I'll save this. I'll stop this, clear the console, and let's stop this and clear the console. Okay, let's go here, refresh this, and remove the checkpoint directory because I'm changing some parameters. So I'll go here, remove this, and remove this, and into the source directory, let's cut them. Let's delete them, in fact, from the test. Okay, and now let's run it again. So what I did, I just say read the latest file. Let's see how it's working. Ideally, it should be reading only the latest file, okay, or maybe the last file. Let's see. So first, it should give us 8 because it has only one file, right? And now, when I paste all the files from this folder to my test folder, it should read only one file. Ideally, I'm not sure. Let's see the documentation. Whether to process latest file first useful when there is a large backlog of file. Okay, let's see. So it gave us 8. It is waiting for the new batch. So what we'll see, we'll paste all the files here, and let's see what it's doing. If it is giving 16, then it means it gave only 64 directly, right? So not sure how it's working. But what it's saying, latest file, whether to process the latest new files first, useful when there is a large backlog of files. I'm not sure, but it did process everything, right? But it processed in a one go. Okay. So there are other properties as well. For example, file name only, max file age. If we don't want to process the files, for example, we have 100 files, and we don't want to process the file which are 5 minutes old. We only want to process the newer file, then we will go for max file age. Okay. Now there's one more important property which I do want to. Now, actually, let's try this property here. Control X, and let's do one thing. So this is very important property, and let's see. Control this, uncomment it. I don't want this one. Okay, so what is going on right now? When we read the files, right? When we read the files from this particular location, these files are getting processed. We are getting results onto the console, and we are good. But let's say we have thousands of files coming to this folder per minute. Then what happened? And you guys know, more the files, more the data, the more time and the more complex it will be read the data from the source folder. For example, what I'm telling you guys, that let's say if I copy these files, right, and I paste them here again. So what exactly happened? That the new files which are on the date modified. So basically, I cannot show you here, but all the new files needs to be written, and the old files need to be ignored. Obviously, right? Because we do not care about the old files which are already processed. But what's going on in this particular scenario, even though these files are not used, Spark is maintaining them into the source directory, which in my case is test. So let's say if we want Spark to delete these files, when they have successfully written. Okay, so what I'll do now, I'll, for example, delete these files quickly for a time being. And let's do one thing. I'll stop this and let's refresh it again. So what I want that after it gave me 8 count onto the console, it should delete that file from the source directory. Okay, so for that we have one property called clean source. We can mention clean source, and in the clean source we have 2 options. First option is delete. So let's see first option. We are saying Spark that once you read the file, process the result, delete the file from the source directory. So let's delete our checkpoint directory and let's try to save this and run this. Okay, and let's run this. So what it should ideally do, it should go here and it should delete this file ideally. Let's see. So it should give me 8. Let's wait for 2 minutes. Okay, it gave me 8. Now let's refresh this if it's gone. Now let's run this again for 1 second. Okay, now let's do one thing, right? Let's do one thing. I'm just trying this option with you guys. So let me paste one more option here and let's paste it here. Okay, so I have more file. So it should give me 16 now. And let's see if it's working. No, it's not working. Not sure why it's not working. Option to clean up the completed file after processing. Options are available: delete, archive, off. If the option is not provided, default value is off. When archive is provided, additional source. Not sure why it's not working in my. So what they're saying, and this is what I was trying to do, that if we want to delete file from the source, once it has been reading completed or the processing has been done, delete it. So there are 2 options into clean source. One is called delete and one is called archive. Okay, in the archive, we need to give one more option, the source archive directory. Okay, so what is the difference between clean source with option delete? That it will delete the directory. It will delete all the files from the source directory. And with the source archive directory, when we say that the clean source is equal to archive, we need to give the source archive directory as some directory name. It will, rather than deleting it, it will cut and paste from source file, from source directory to this directory. Okay, let's remove them. So this is how the file will working, reading the file and all. We already read from the socket, right? Now let's see how rate source work. Okay, so I have created one example for rate. Let's go here and Control S. So what rate source will be doing, that into rate source, the format obviously will be rate, right? We need to play around with the format. For console, it will be console. For file, it will be the format of the file, like maybe JSON, CSV, Parquet. In the rate, it will be rate. The format is rate. Then we need to tell that how many rows we need to produce. So basically, rate format is the format that is used for testing your application. So let's say if we say rows per second, right, and we say produce 1 row per second. So what I'm doing here, I'm telling the Spark application that okay, read and produce 1 row per second, and then write those rows onto my console. Okay, let's see how it works. So what rate is used for? Rate is used to test your application. So console, socket and rate will be only used for testing your application. They won't be used into your production application. Okay, they just used for you to learn this Spark or test your application. Let's see. Sorry, I will be stopping this in 1 second. So 1 second, I will be running this now. run as Scala application. Let's see. So what I'm telling here, that use the rate format, okay, and then generate 1 row per second for me, and give some value to it. So basically, what I'm doing, I'm adding a new column here. The column of the name is result, and the value of the column is value, where the value is coming from here. Okay, let's see how it works. So first it will print is streaming, right? So data streaming is true. Then the first batch is null, and then it produced, see how it is producing the rows for me. So it is producing the timestamp, and it's producing the rows 1 row per second for me, right? So let's expand it just to see, show you guys. So first it says is streaming data frame init df is streaming. That's true, right? Okay. So is the streaming is a function which will give true or false based on your data frame, whether it's a streaming database data frame or not. So into my case, my initial data frame is a streaming database. So it is streaming data frame. So it gave us true, right? The first batch was empty. The second batch was it ran for 6 seconds, so it gave us 6 rows. The second row, and it is giving me result C. Let me stop it. So this is just for the testing purposes, just to test how your application is working. And so we have 4 sources: file, socket. We have covered rate, and the fourth one is Kafka, which I will be covering when I cover Kafka in a lot of detail. Okay. One more thing which I think I have covered, but let me cover it again. When we are reading file, right? When we are reading file and we want our streaming application to infer the schema, right? So when we are doing it into your structured API, what we are doing, we are putting some option here, dot option, right? And then we are saying infer schema, and then we say true, right? This is what we were doing. Now into your structured streaming API, when you want your schema to be inferred, you need to tell that property here, that dot config, when you that dot config property when you're creating your Spark session. So you need to give one property here, that please infer schema using this property, spark.sql.streaming.schema inference is equal to true. So what it will do, if from the files like Parquet, Avro, JSON, if the schema is inbuilt into that file, it will infer the schema. Okay, this is how it works. This is good. Now let's see one more thing. So we have covered schema here. Okay, now let's cover one more thing, right? So we know one part, that our Spark streaming structured streaming jobs are triggered whenever, let's say, into the console, when we are hitting enter, then a new job is getting triggered. In file, whenever new file is copied to the source, a new job is getting triggered, right? But the question arises, can we control this behavior? If we want to trigger our jobs, let's say every 5 seconds, or whenever 2 files arrive, or something else, can we control this behavior? The answer to the question is yes, we can control this behavior, and there is option into Spark streaming, Spark structured streaming, in which we can define our trigger. Okay, let's see what those triggers are. They should be somewhere here. Okay, so what they say, that there are 4 types of trigger. The first one is by default, in which if no trigger is set it specifically, then by default it will be created micro batches whenever a new event will occur, right? And what it will do, where micro batches will be generated as soon as previous micro batch is completed, right? So what in case of socket, whenever we are entering something onto the console and we are hitting enter, it is processing the batch and it will generate a new batch as soon as this batch is completed, right? One more is fixed time batch intervals. So in this case, we can tell Spark, okay, trigger batch every 5 seconds. We can give times in second, and we can say trigger batch every second or every 5 seconds, whatever. I'll show you. Third type of trigger is one-time micro batch. It is like, let's say you are creating your Spark application. You have your, and you want to import files. Okay, you are creating your Spark applications, and you have your source file system. This is a file system, and you want to bring them into HDFS. This is your HDFS. For example, you have multiple files here. Let's say 10K files here. You want to use your Spark streaming application to copy these files into HDFS in one go, and this is only one time. So what you'll say, you will have one-time micro batch, and the trigger will be only once. Trigger will be only once. Okay, I'll show you this as well. And the fourth one is, which is still in development, still in testing, experimental. What it says, ping these location continuously. As soon as new event arrive, bring it. As soon as new event arrive, bring it. Right. This query will be executed in the new low latency continuous processing mode. Right. And it's still an experiment. So now the question arises, how do we need to mention this kind of trigger? Right. So the trigger will be mentioned on the write stream, first thing, right? The second thing is, to mention the trigger, we need to use, let me copy this and I'll explain it there. And so let's say I'll go here into my, even here itself directly. So I'll say here that use this property, okay? So I want my trigger to be created every 5 seconds, let's say. Okay, so, and what we were doing here, we are reading the file from the test, right? From here, let's refresh this. Let's see how many files were there. And let's remove this for time being, the test file. Okay, so now we have only one file, right? And let's remove CHK1 as well. So I'll show you one more thing. I'll refresh this. I'll remove the CHK1 as well. Okay, now what we are saying, that even this I don't want. So we are saying that, okay, read the JSON file from this test folder and create the temp view, count the number of rows into the temp view, which has zip code type equal to standard, and print that result onto my console. But this time we want that result to be printed on console every 5 seconds. So let's say if I'm copying 5 files in every 5 seconds, so it will be considering, it will trigger only after 5 seconds. Let's see how this behavior is. Okay, let's clear the console. Let's run this application. So it will print 8, right? And then we will do one thing. We'll copy this. In fact, let's do one thing. We'll go here. We have copied our extra files here, right? So let's copy them. Control C. Let's go to our test. Check point directory created here. Let's go to test and wait for 2 seconds and see here. First of all, it will give us 8 and it's waiting for us, right? So now when I paste those files here, it will only give me result after 5 seconds. Why? Because see, 5 seconds, right? And it will wait for me now. So now if I say here, if I paste those files again, basically let's do one thing. In fact, copy from here because it's getting, 1 second. Let's refresh this. So see, it is not triggering a new batch, right? It's waiting for the file. And what I'll do now, I'll just copy this, Control C, and I'll paste it here again. And it will wait for 5 seconds now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it will give me 72, something like this. See, so what I'm telling here, that it will wait for 5 seconds. Okay. Now let's say if we want to read these files only once, let's remove this checkpoint directory here. Okay, and clear the console. And we only want this. Let's say we have our source file in which we have these 9 files. We have a source in which these 9 files, and we want to import this 9 file only once into our destination, right? So I'll say trigger dot once, right? And let's run this. So what this application will do, it will import everything at once and then stop. Once, when we mention trigger as once, it will act as your batch application. Your Spark Structured Streaming application will act as batch if we mention trigger.once. Let's see, it will only give me 72, right? 972, yeah. So 9 files were there. Per file has 8 records with this condition. So it should give me 72 as a result, and then it should stop. Let's see. Yeah, so it stopped, right? It stopped automatically. It gave us the result, and it acts as the batch application, right? The other one is your continuous, which is in testing mode, but continuous and processing time almost same, but continuous more real time. Okay, we have covered default one, like when we haven't mentioned, it is just waiting for the new micro batch, and once the previous micro batch is completed, it will trigger the new micro batch. Fixed interval we have covered using trigger.processing time. One time processing we covered using once, and this is experimental, and this is very simple to implement. Okay, so this is how you will control the triggering. Okay, and to be honest, these things are very important, because you need to control the triggering based on your requirement, right? For example, if you want your application to trigger only once for one-time processing, you will say once. If you want to process all the files arrived in 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 1 minute, then you can say process time is equal to 2 seconds or up to 1 minute, whatever you want to say, right? Now the one more thing is, so this is how triggering works. We have covered input sources, we have covered triggering. Let's cover one more thing. That's called window operations. Okay, so let's do one thing.